Hello and welcome to Not Real Men. It's me, Laser, a trans guy, and your friend.
And I am Colin. I am a non-binary masked person and also potentially your friend. We'll see.
Yeah, a little bit more guarded about it, which I think is safe. I think I've learned recently that I am too friendly and I need to maybe be more guarded with my heart. Colin,
oh, no.
The last time we recorded this podcast was February 4th, 2014.
Yeah, so 2024.
2024, yes. No, 2014.
No, 2014.
No.
You're right the first time. I didn't mean to correct.
2024. I was looking at 2024, but it's hard to believe that that's where we're at. It's very funny that we've been releasing this podcast and my friends have been like, this podcast feels like it's in a very different era of your life. And I'm like, yeah, that is true. It took me a long time to release this, and that's on me because I got like a job and got busy and stuff. But we're going to talk about some stuff today and also catch up on the past year. I've seen you once in the past year.
That's true.
Yeah,
while I was in LA in November.
Yeah. So. Pretty wild. Have you listened to the podcast at all as it's been released?
Yes, I listened to the episodes that have gotten released, yes.
Oh, amazing. What do you feel like you have perspective on any of the things that we talked about that you didn't have when we talked about them?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went through an actual relationship since we recorded and now. That's about all I'm going to say about that. But it certainly changed my perspective on a lot of things. And, you know, you can observe a lot from the outside. And I'd been in like situationships and that kind of thing before. But it definitely has informed how I'm looking at things. And I think also the shifting political landscape has also redoubled my feeling that this podcast is very needed to talk about healthy masculinity and how we can show up in ways that are not atrocious. That is the word.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Listening to the podcast, and I haven't listened to all of it because I have a hard time listening to my own voice.
Same.
But yeah, but your voice is so beautiful, Colin. How dare you?
How dare I?
But it's been very funny. My boyfriend has been like recapping it for me and been like, this happened. I don't know about this. And it's very funny to me, just like getting the whole perspective. But yeah, I mean, just as a quick update, since the last year, I realized I became gay. So I'm just into dudes and dude flavored humans. Now I have a boyfriend. I also feel like my tea has settled down a little bit. I was like a true monster for a while through puberty. And I think I am still kind of a monster, but I think I have a handle on it a little bit better.
That's for the progression of puberty. So, you know.
Yeah. I also, Colin, I haven't told you this, but I literally just started on ADHD meds, which has been so helpful. Like one of the reasons this podcast didn't get released is that it's like so hard to make and do things. I don't know if you've heard about this, but
yes, I am familiar with executive dysfunction.
But I'm literally just like a week and a half into them. So I can't be like, and it solved all my problems. What I will say is, given the fact that the world is ending in about 12 ways, I'm really happy and energetic, which I think just means I'm on drugs. So that
checks out.
Yeah. Even as the world slowly ends. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is something that I've been noticing in my life of how do you find, like, what do you think is the difference between places where you, Colin, show up and feel comfortable and safe and happy to be yourself, and the places where you don't feel happy to be yourself or like safe? Like I've noticed this a lot, like during the holiday season, as we go through, like, I go to a bunch of parties with a bunch of straight people, and then I go to parties with normal people, and I'm like, oh, this is better when I don't have to like translate myself. And whether it's either just like, I don't care what these people are talking about and they're not listening to me on a real level, or just like, or the actual like microaggression situation of trying to play Cards Against Humanity in a room of cis-hets, and it's like, oh, we've made a mistake with everything we've done. Do you have what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in essence, you said it's the people who really make the vibe of the space one that I can show up as myself and I don't really mask anymore. Like, I just, like, I've just like straight up walked away from like conversations that are not like just small talk, but are small talk to the point of feeling like a episode of Black Mirror, where it's like,
sure.
It's like, these are the things that you're emphatically caring about. And I don't know, it's tough. But yeah, I also like that you are framing the neurospicy queer as normal and everyone else as not normal, which, checks out.
Am I wrong though?
No, because like we're the ones that are having a normal reaction to literally everything that's happening. So like,
right.
You know,
well, that's
like,
the thing. I think it's so funny. Like, I also got my official autism diagnosis this year, and like just realizing like that one of the things that a lot of folks on the autism spectrum care about is just like justice and like what's actually matters and right and wrong and stuff. And other people have this ability to ignore it that makes me absolutely bewildered of like, how is the one thing you care about in 2025 growing your muscles or riding your bike or whatever? Like, it's just like, it's just like the world is ending and there are so many things you can be doing to help, and shouldn't that be the first thing on your list? But I guess, you know, that's just the autism talking.
Yeah. That's just the tism. Yeah.
It's just, listen, and I don't know, but maybe I was saying I went to a birthday party last night and I was wearing my loops because I have loops now. I'm very proud of myself. These little like earplugs. And I walked up to my friend and she said, "It's giving autism." And I was like, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. That's what I was going for.
Yeah, that's what this outfit means to me. So thank you.
I don't know if we've officially talked about this or like on the podcast, but I haven't been officially diagnosed, but I took a couple test things and they were like, well, we don't know if you have autism, but there's enough stuff that you definitely have ADD. And like the ADD autism Venn diagram, depending on how your flavor of autism shows up, can be almost a circle. So it's hard to officially say one way or the other. And and that's the thing with autism, is like everyone's shows up as different. Some people have difficulty verbalizing, some people, you know, don't understand social cues, some people are hyper attuned to social cues. So it can be it's sort of just like a lens through which people experience the world, which tints our perspective in a certain way and affects how we show
just
up.
Like gender, like anything, like all these words are just invented to explain the things that are already happening, etc. Also, it took me a year to get diagnosed, and I had to keep following up. The best part of the whole process was that the woman who was testing me definitely had undiagnosed ADHD, and so she kept like dropping the ball and like forgetting stuff, and I would have to call and remind her that we had appointments, and it felt like a test. It felt like it was just like horrible experience.
Is this part of it?
Is this it? Is this part of it? Am I supposed to forget and then I get the diagnosis, or is it what the hell? And she was so like not a safe, well, maybe we could talk about this too, like a safe person to talk to about extremely personal stuff, because part of it was like I also got a PTSD diagnosis, but talking to a person who's not listening to you and telling them the worst things that have happened in your life, and she's like, yep, okay, yeah, okay, well, that's normal, and it's like, that's not the right thing to say right now in this world, in the place that I need, you know.
I think that also is an important point to like, because I think for any non-disabled people, especially listening to this, and people with disabilities or neurodivergence, just because someone also has a neurodivergent thing doesn't mean that they're going to be warm and empathetic to what you're going through, and a safe person to be around. People with disabilities and neurodivergence can also be shitty. Look at Elon Musk. So,
oh my God. One of my, like, my mom saw Elon Musk on SNL and was really excited because he said he was the first person with autism to be on SNL, which is like the least true thing anyone's ever said.
Yeah,
But
no.
it was like, and I just had to like go with both of my parents, be like, oh, have we not turned on Elon Musk yet? What's happening? Wait, guys, like, how did you not know? And but that's absolutely true. Of like, there is still work to do, even if you have, you know, something that makes you normal like us. You know, you still have to be good at being a person.
Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like people are quick to ascribe one person with one thing as a representation for all of that, and or like base their judgment of inherent morality when it relates to ADD or autism on like the most notable person at the time or public person who has that. And yeah, I think with autism especially, media representation has not done a lot of favors. I mean, recently it's gotten better, but like, yeah, I mean, you know, the most classic, or not classic, but like the most notable examples I can think of growing up were, you know, nonverbal kids who made women and femmes feel uncomfortable. And like, that's like, I'm not qualified to unpack all of that, but it's not like most of the people with autism or ADD that I know are very socially awkward, but are also always checking in to be like, and whether that's like a chicken egg scenario or like, you know, like if people are aware of that perception, so we're hyper vigilant with ourselves or with like other people or that kind of thing to try to like not make anyone feel uncomfortable, because we don't want, like, hopefully it's from a place of genuinely not wanting to make other humans uncomfortable rather than a self-preservation like optics thing. But yeah.
I mean that extrapolates everywhere, and I think, well, maybe that's a good transition to masculinity. As an expert in masculinity transitions, I want to talk about. Let's do a fun one. How do men communicate with each other? This has been like a little like a investigation that I've been on this year of like, I have a lot of friends now that have only ever known me as a man, which is very new to me. And so trying to figure out how bros do stuff when they are in the space of other bros. Here are some things that I found out. Mostly, you have to be in a different house and everybody's playing a video game, and then you can get on the headset and be like, bro, like Sarah broke up with me. Like that feels like a safe place to communicate if you're bros. Or sitting in a car next to a guy, you know, then you can talk because you don't have to make eye contact with each other. That's a safe way. I also got, oh my God, the invitations to hang out from my straight man friends are like, not sure if you are up to anything Saturday afternoon. I am trying to make some kind of hang happen. It's so unspecific, but I love trying. And then also so right now, just to like put a time date, it's January 19th. And Los Angeles is on fire. And so just bros checking in and being like, you okay with the fire stuff? It's like, yes, thank you. Thank you. It's sweet. It's sweet when it happens, but it's also very funny that it has to be caveated in like, let's not make eye contact and actually bro too hard. What have you learned from your years in investigating?
From my years living among the bros.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you're saying, the no eye contact is something that's deeply troubling, because there's also like the thing of like men and mass people being like touch starved, and because like they don't hug really. I mean, the friend groups that I'm in now, like eye contact, deep combos, being like, hey, let's hang out, like direct communication. And I try to like not, in my earlier years, I would definitely perpetuate that stuff of like, oh, I can't like be like, oh, I want to hang out, because then that'll be weird. But now I'm just like, hey, let's hang out. And then like, I don't know, I try to let all my friends know how much they mean to me and that kind of thing. And whether it's like verbally or through showing up for people or that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm glad that I have the friends that I have now who are like, who we could just be direct with each other and not have to worry about that stuff. But like earlier in my life, definitely there was that. And I didn't have the words for it then, but I could definitely notice the disparity between, you know, how like the whole male loneliness epidemic thing, which is both self-perpetuated and also like self-inflicting harm and inflicts harm to others. And that correlation between how like men don't hug, men don't share their actual feelings, men aren't direct even with each other about wanting to hang out. And if they are, it's like, oh, you're making it weird. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, just the eye contact thing. Like there's, and for me, eye contact is a very, not hot button issue, but there's more layers to that because like if I'm in a social setting that's like a bar or something, then I don't have eye contact with like anyone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a safety thing. I mean, if it's strangers, is that what you mean? Or is it?
Oh, no, just like being 4 feet tall. Like literally, I don't make eye contact with people. So like that's, so I prefer hangouts where it's like sitting, or even if it's at a bar, if there's like bar stools or like things where I can like, because it's such a psychological, like neuroscientific thing of like, if we're making eye contact with each other, that increases feelings of connectedness and like intimacy, like platonic intimacy and non-platonic, I guess. But like, yeah, there's a multifaceted thing of like how any sort of bonding in that regard has been, you know, I mean, this is less common of an insult nowadays, but like people still use the term gay as like a derogatory thing. So it's, and like, I think there's very real remnants of that whole homophobic like phenomenon that was applied to just connection on a friend level with other people. Yeah. And I think that's still informing, you know, stuff like you're saying of like the no eye contact, the no directness with things. Yeah. It is really refreshing, I think, when people are able to do it. I have a friend who happens to be straight, who is lovely, but I've really legitimately noticed like we are safe people to hug and he really needs it. It's just like nice to be like, bro, it's okay. Like, it's fine. And we could just hang and we can like, I don't know. It makes me like happy to be able to provide. I think this is one of the gifts that the queer community has, is like being, first of all, just like honest about what people are comfortable with. But like, yeah, we can chill. We can put our arms around each other and you can have touch and it doesn't have to be weird and it doesn't have to be gay. But it should be. And it doesn't have to be. It should always. Legitimately, I was playing D&D the other night, and my friend apologized that two of the non-player characters were not kissing because they were both boys. And I was like, thank you. That's what you should do to me, because I need that. I need that always. If you don't apologize for two same-sex characters not kissing, then it's a hate crime. So. It's a hate crime.
So true. Colin, do you go get your hair cut by somebody? What is that social experience like for me? For you? It's always been so weird to me.
Oh, like in general?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you talk to a person?
I mean, I talk to the barber sometimes. I've had to go to different places because I move around sometimes, and I've had to find a new place to go recently. And like, I used to go to places that were near either if I was like one of my hobbies or that kind of thing, because like in my neighborhood there wasn't a much, but like so if my hobbies or living situation changes, basically I'm saying I've had a lot of different barbers and people. And I don't really have like a person right now, mostly because the last person like had a pro-genocide flag, and I was like, okay, maybe not this.
Maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much. I mean, she was very sweet. Other than that, and I was like, the other than that is a very
right. Other than genocide, of course.
Yeah. So, but to answer the question, which I haven't. I don't have ADD. I'm fine. I'm normal. No, I'm abnormal. There we go. We've established that not having ADD is not normal. So, I've only had like the bro experience of like getting a haircut where they shave most of it and then like trim parts. Mm-hmm. Also, people don't know what to do with my hair, so that's and when I have to
it's so beautiful, and they don't want to ruin it because it's so gorgeous.
Well, it's like wavy, and it's also curly, and it's also longish, and it sort of isn't uniform really. So I wound up going to salons basically, or like non-specifically like non-hyper-gendered places of like, this is a barber shop for men, and then this is a salon for women. And luckily there's a lot of queer places in New York that are very like, we cut hair. So
what you got? Let's do it. Yeah. Well, that's my, I mean, I recently got a haircut. You can't tell because I haven't styled it today, but you would be very impressed with my new haircut. It's great. But that was the first time I went back to this place in LA called Folklore in like 5 years, just because I got broke and like, it's way cheaper to just go to a barber. And I was going to a place, it's not like specifically for men, but it is like a barber shop. And I don't know. It's always, haircutting has always been like a social nightmare for me because I'm like, I don't know what do you do? But then I listened to a podcast where Justin McElroy, brother of our former guest, Travis McElroy, was like, you just ask them how long they've been barbering and if they like it. And I'm like, that's so smart. What a good question. And then I just do that and everything is fine.
Yeah.
But you're like a charming, I don't know. It feels like maybe it's just because of how, what I feel about you, but I feel like you're good at like starting a conversation and asking interesting questions to people, even strangers.
Yeah. I mean, for barber stuff, it's usually like, how long you've been in the city? Like, what have you know? And then sometimes they'll ask what I do, and then I'll talk about like making art and stuff. And then I think there was a conversation where we talked about like how haircutting is all like, it's an artistry thing. And it's also, you know, I don't know. I remember talking to someone about like how what they do is a form of therapy, and also the sort of subconscious expectation of customers in when they go to like a health or wellness thing, whether it's like a massage place or physical therapy or that kind of thing, for them to also provide like therapy services that are not related to that. Even like, you know, going to a bar and talking to a bartender and venting about your day and that kind of thing. So for sure. we were just talking about the multifaceted stuff of what being a barber entails, and they seemed glad to have a place to voice that stuff. So it's, I don't know. When I'm in a setting where there's like someone who works in public service, I try to keep in mind that they probably deal with a lot of entitled, shitty people, whether it's like being on wait staff at a restaurant or that kind of thing. And it's like, if I can, you know, be someone who's the opposite of that and that kind of thing, then I try to. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I get hyper aware of the fact that they're not allowed to be mean to me or exit the conversation. And then I get very much in my head of like, but maybe they don't want to talk about this. And maybe, but I think asking like very open questions, and they don't have to give you as specific a detail as, I mean, they, you know, everybody's allowed to talk as much or as little as they want. This question came from my boyfriend, by the way, the barber question, who was just at the barber and said, all the men filing in the shop and sitting exactly one seat apart for as long as we can while waiting. It's classic stuff.
Because they're not gay, so they can't sit next to each other.
Well,
that is the prerequisite for being gay, is sitting next to each other and having accidental elbow contact.
I will say
that was sarcasm, by the way.
Oh, interesting. Okay, gotcha.
Yes, great. Cool.
I'm like, am I gay then? Have I sat next to?
No.
We went to see, I think, Wicked. I've seen Wicked a couple times. I want to talk to you about Wicked. Do you see it, or do you hate, or you think we're done with Wicked?
I haven't seen the movie yet. And it's unexcusable, but I mean, I've seen the musical, and like, I want to watch it, but on my own time. And like, I mean, I saw the still of Cynthia Erivo, like with the dress that like goes everywhere, and like it looks very cool. And for that, I was like, maybe I should see it in a theater. But I mean, I've already seen it. I know what happens. Like, I don't know. If I'm spending money on a thing, I try to have it be a new experience or a thing that I'm not familiar with. But I also know it's a cultural phenomenon. So. And also, Nessa is great disability representation from what I've heard. So,
Cool.
And then like, I don't know, I've watched too many like think pieces on the political breakdowns of the things. So I'm like, yeah.
You watch too many what?
Like think pieces on the political breakdown of like, you know, Glinda and sort of white feminism, and how like there's a tendency to like want to go to this with the status quo and be like, oh, you're making too much of a disruption or that kind of thing. And
yeah. Yeah. Vibe. Well,
were we going to ask about it?
Yeah. I love the way this has gone.
Off the cliff,
I was saying that we went to a Wicked screening, and my boyfriend and I went to the bathroom at the same time, and he didn't make eye contact with me in the bathroom, and it's the funniest thing that's ever happened. I was like, oh, okay, just in case people might think that I might think you're gay. Like, I don't understand, but I get it. But I think the thing I've realized, like, at least in a public, like, most like a bathroom does seem safe to me. I'm scarier than they are to like straight men. Like if I smile at them, that's scarier to them than them growling at me. So it's a very interesting, like, I don't know, but whatever. We can all, I think I'm just way more comfortable. And I think it comes from just being in LA for so long, of like being a weird little gay guy. And I don't care if people have a problem with it or if it's visible. I was trying really hard to not be visible for a while, but now I'm like, fucking hell. It's a choice that I it's like a privilege that I have of like trying to seem abnormal. But I also, like, I don't know, who cares? It's boring. I only like people who are different, so why would I try to not be that?
I also feel like the guys who are uncomfortable with that are the same people. I mean, maybe not like one-to-one, but at least a lot of overlap of guys who catcall and or harass women who are viscerally uncomfortable with eye contact with another guy, which projecting is a word. So like,
it is a word. It's a word that people say. I mean, when I was in grad school for a month, we watched, we like, you know, those studies where like the most repressed people are also the gayest people. Like, it's just a very interesting, like secret gay. And I think people need to work on their repression and projection, but it's hard. I get it.
Turn that eye inward.
Turn your eye inward, man. That's our lesson. Let's see. Vegan. I just wrote the word vegan.
Nice.
Any notes?
Actually, I've been less. I went back to vegetarian recently because my body wasn't absorbing protein. So I was like, well, and I honestly like got tired of hanging out with friends when we'd all go get pizza, and if they had a vegan pizza, it was just bread and sauce, and that's the most like one of the more depressing things I've eaten. And I'm just like, well, you know, I live in New York, and the one thing that I guess the two things that are better than LA are pizza and bagels. And people sometimes say sushi, but they're lying, and tacos, but they're also lying about that. LA has better tacos. Like,
you heard it here. They're calling out your tacos, New York. I mean, here's the thing.
Calling out.
Oh, wow. Okay, and that's our show, everybody. Thank you so much.
You made the first pun, you know? Like, wow. You made a pun before I did, and then now you're like, oh, well, Colin made one, so the show's over.
We're done. I want to talk about another not fun thing, which is calling out bad behavior. The question was, one of the questions was, can you think of a moment when you wish a guy had been, an ally had been more ally-y? I went through a situation this year, and I'm going to talk about this, and then you should talk, and also feel free to interrupt me, where we had a guy in a community of ours that was kind of creeping on ladies, but it hadn't gotten to the point where people were like, it was like an early set of smoke signals. And we had this choice of like, wait till this becomes a problem and we have to turn him in, or can we talk to him before that happens? And what does that look like? And how much should we be talking about this guy? Like, it starts to become like, feel like gossip, and it feels like talking about people behind their backs. But it was also like, we should protect people. And that feels like the right thing to do is like go, well, right now, this is only with folks who feel confident to say no and feel comfortable with like talking to other people about it. But this is a community with young people and new people. And we ended up just intervening and straight up talking to him and being like, hey, just so you know, this is messed up. And if you do these further things of like trying to, you know, you may not realize you have this power, which is always this thing with men, is not realizing they have authority or power in a community. Yeah, quote, big. You cannot see both of us doing air quotes. You know, and you have to be careful how you wield this power. I think I've noticed that some men like to say that, like to ascribe a lot of power to women for being hot or irresistible or whatever, and like therefore I do not have power anymore because this woman is seducing me by existing, and it simply must be not part of your brain. Like you cannot
like it's
pass the buck that way.
No, like it's victim blaming. It's saying that you are so unevolved that you lack baseline self-control, that you're basically like not even evolved past whatever mammal that you want to draw a comparison to. It's like, oh, it's like expecting a dog to not eat a steak or whatever, and it's like, and it's like, are you saying you have less social conditioning and less moral and self-awareness than a dog? Like, is that really the hill that you're gonna die on with, like saying that you can't, you know, stop yourself from hitting on women or worse because of how they look? Yeah. Like that's, and also like saying like they don't have self-awareness. Like I think the reason we both did the air quotes is because like there's lack of self-awareness and then there's semi-willful ignorance to actually look at yourself. Because like in a post-Me Too era and like all this, there's no excuse for not being at least semi-aware of like that when you catcall, it makes people uncomfortable. Like, and or the dynamics that happen, that, and like also like these guys that talk about like they don't realize the power they have, like all they give a shit about is power. Like all the, like these Andrew Tate bros, these like Elon Musk bros, like all they care about is like having power and dominance and like embracing like these like awful parts of masculinity and like throwing away everything else and hyper focusing on those things. And it's bullshit. Like I'm sure there are some men that are genuinely just not aware. And like, but I think the number is far greater of men who claim ignorance over how much power they have when they focus on that, when they go to the gym to like get stronger, to like get more like mass, to, and like they take these like, they talk about how like masculinity is dying and like real men are dying or whatever. And it's like the real man is dying and like chivalry is dead or whatever. And it's like, so you're simultaneously wanting to embrace and like increase parts of yourself that are connected to power, but you're saying you don't understand the power that you have over other people. Like that's like, you're just choosing not to engage and connect those parts at that point.
Yeah. Vibe. I think that's, oh my God, I think that's so true. And I think I found, at least in this situation, that also like, well, in my life, when I find when people have been trying to correct me on a thing I'm wrong, and it's so normal to just immediately be like, no, that's not me. I don't, because it feels so bad to be told you're doing something wrong, right? Yeah. And you feel like you start to like look outwards. And so I think it's an interesting, like, if you're in the position where you actually have to have this conversation, what do you do? And I guess my advice is to start from a point of, you probably don't know this, and this is a thing that I've observed, and this is what's actually, like, not like you are trying to groom people, but like these are the facts of the situation, and this is how it could be perceived. And I am telling you because I believe that you would not want to willingly hurt people, and maybe you should do things differently if you don't want it to be perceived this way. Whereas, I mean, there are some people I would just like to drop kick into the sun as well. Yeah. But and I think that's, I mean, most people statistically. But it's like when you're in that situation where you can actually like pull somebody aside and say something, and also be willing to know like that person might be done with you, and also people might see you as kind of a bummer or whatever. And I think that to be honest, those are the people I like who are seen as like, well, yeah, he can be grumpy. And it's like, yeah, he can be grumpy when shit is bad. So don't, if you've pissed him off, then you know you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, like if I'm not making enemies of bigots, like then like what am I doing with my life? Also like to qualify, or not qualify, but to provide additional context for what I was saying before, like we are all brought up in a cis heteronormative patriarchal racist system. Like these systems have predated us for a long time. Some of them might exist after we're gone. Like I'm hoping we can dismantle a lot of it within my and our lifetime, but I want to acknowledge that it's a marathon, not a sprint, to dismantle forms of oppression. And if we're being raised in those, there's a like natural tendency that we're going to acquire and have a lot of harmful tendencies. And like being corrected is like as much as it can. And I've had that defensive reaction before as well, of being like, wait, no, I'm not that person. I wouldn't do that. And what's important to know is like, they're not saying you're inherently a bad person. They're saying you're exhibiting a toxic behavior. And like, I think it takes a lot of behavior to define us as people. That's repeated behavior over time that like becomes an inherent characteristic rather than a symptom of being raised in a harmful society. And that's the thing, is that like any of us have the capacity to be really good or really bad, and most of us exist in between. And most of us have multifaceted things. We're really good in some areas, but have areas of ignorance in other areas. If you are a person who has been corrected, whether it's with patriarchal, toxic masculinity, sexist shit, or other things, like if you can, and it's hard to not have that defensive reaction, because like there are some guys that are like, well, it's a witch hunt for men, which using witch hunt to describe that is the whole thing that people have done podcasts about.
Yeah. We're always witch-hunting men for being part of the patriarchy. That's exactly what it is.
It's not been a tool that's been used to persecute queer femmes, usually non-white, but you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, that was also sarcasm. So
okay.
Yeah. I've had people not know when I say sarcastic things because I say it in a tone that's almost identical to this. So I need to.
Well, I can see your eyebrows. The audience can't, so it's probably good because I feel like
good to accessibility. But to answer the question of like an example, and I might have already said this, so if so, can you let me know and we can cut this section? But
of course.
So I was at a art summit for people with disabilities and people with dwarfism specifically. And I was walking back with some other people that were there. I think they were all men or masked people who also had dwarfism. And this femme person walked in front of us. And I forgot how catcalling worked because my brain takes things literally sometimes. And I forgot that people can like whisper or say it under their breath or like do it in a way that's not like hugely vocal. And that's actually a large percent of what happens because a lot of men are cowards and oh, I'm going to whisper a thing to show dominance because I'm too afraid to say it out loud because I don't want people to hear me and know that I'm a piece of shit, which is
I really want ironic. A supercut of this podcast of us going men, some men, or men, a lot lot of men like qualifying because we're so
and it's like I don't want to feed into the thing of like hashtag not all men or whatever, but said non-ironically. Like it's enough. And there's this thing, this last thing that's like, if you have like 1 out of 5 men who's a predator and the other 4 don't do anything, then they might as well not exist.
Right.
And,
so continue your catcalling story.
Yeah. So continue the catcalling story. So, walking with people, and then I forgot that catcalling can happen and does happen a lot with whispers and less vocalized, things. And so I hear this person to my left say, "God bless." And then I look over because I'm thinking he's looking on something on his phone. And then I see him looking at the person who just crossed in front of us. And I started to I don't know what I was going to say, but I started to open my mouth. And he was like, "Man, I'll bet she's thinking, I don't want to talk to those little guys. You know, these little guys aren't like," and there's a lot of unpacking that has to happen with people with disabilities and people with dwarfism and sexism and patriarchal beauty standards that are inflicting harm onto men that lead to that in conjunction with the lack of going to therapy, which is a choice to not do, even if it's on a societal level discouraged, especially for men or masked people. But there needs to be an unpacking that happens with be internalized self-loathing of not feeling like you're enough for a patriarchal beauty standard of being tall, dark, handsome, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then how men weaponize that and will blame women for it. And so just to unpack what went into that entire
women who haven't even said anything.
No,
right?
who just are existing. And so like after he said like, oh, you know, she probably is thinking I don't want to talk to those little guys. And I was like, or, you know, she's thinking it's 9 p.m. at night and she doesn't want to engage with a group of strange guys making comments on her appearance. And maybe as people who have comments made on our appearance, we should maybe not do that. And then he was like, no, it's different. I was just like,
oh, okay. Oh, it's different when I do it. That makes sense, actually. Yeah, sure, fine.
I'm like, and I was like, nowhere did I say they're the same thing. Like, that's not, but saying like, if you go through a specific instance of, you know, feeling oppressed or, you know, systemically discriminated against, and there's enough of overlap between that and a behavior that you're exhibiting, maybe having some self-awareness of like, hey, maybe I'm doing the thing that's at least adjacent to the thing that people do to me that I don't like.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, really hard. And like, it's the like most visible example of that in my life has been the like nerds conquering the world and then taking revenge on hot girls like thing that became just like a sort of a cool trope we were doing for a while. But I think it happens so often. And I mean, like you say, like
literally the origin of Facebook was like a service that it was like rating college women. And then now that guy is just like, I guess, in our government somehow. Like, and like him and Musk like sent like millions to the inauguration thing. And like they're, but I saw this thing that was like our future is run by losers or something, and talking about how all these guys are just like such losers and like people who like people look up to, but they're just so just trash and just.
And ultimately that's the insecurity, right? It's not the like being a nerd or being good at computers or being bad at sports. It's the insecurity and the need to like have revenge and to like play out your power. I saw this incredible play recently that was Mark Zuckerberg as a Shakespearean like tragic hero basically. And it, you know, he turns dark obviously at the end of like, but it was a really, really good unpacking of like his perceived helplessness in the world of having the most power that anyone has, of just like, how does that make a person feel like they can't do anything when in fact they could do anything. They could do anything. But
I think part of the danger of that is that it's encourage like seeing people who are like, I know we're joking, like, oh, these are losers, but we're not joking. But like, it discourages like the whole manosphere thing and how it's like predatory towards like young men and boys especially, and how like a lot of young men and boys are going to see these people rise to power who are just like perceived helpless and that kind of thing, but are also predatory and harmful and are like doing these awful things. And there's going to be a message that's sent of like, I don't have to change anything about myself. I can be the exact miserable person who doesn't understand why I'm miserable and is blaming women for it. And I don't have to grow or change, and I can be like these people. And I mean, I think that's why it's important to try to do the work that we're doing and to try to like fight back against this mentality of, you know, like, and that's the Republican thing of like acknowledging that there's a problem, but then blaming it on someone who's not at fault. Of like, oh, hey, you know how you can't afford anything? It's immigrants' fault. Or like, oh, hey, you know how you don't feel safe? It's trans people's fault. Or like, and this overwhelming zeitgeist of like, oh, you know how you're miserable as a guy, you feel like you don't have your own agency, you feel like you're not making enough at your job, which defines your worth as a man. You know who's to blame? Women. And it's like, oh, you don't have to develop a better personality, you don't have to, you know, like trying to be a kind person who engages empathetically with people because it's the right thing to do. No, we're going to give you tools to how to manipulate people into thinking you're that, or we're just going to like take away laws that like, prevent you from being, like charged if you do some heinous shit.
Yeah.
And like,
right.
to go and like, we were talking about like haircuts versus salons. And I wanted to mention how this is like a representative of like the pink tax.
Yeah.
Of like how it's more expensive to exist as a woman or femme person, like especially with like beauty standards and the expectation that you're supposed to fulfill, and to access the same products and services that have been heavily gendered, whether it's like razors or that kind of thing, or in this case haircuts. Like you can't. I mean, obviously you can go to whichever you want to, but like societal pressure is societal pressure, and and it's just like that simultaneous like paradox of thinking you don't have power when you do. Thinking that women have it easier, or like when they're literally having to pay more money to exist and function in a way that society deems acceptable. And
I mean, like, it's so like as a trans guy, I see it all the time. It's just like, wow, this is easier. This is way easier. Everything about this is easier, and it's great. Like in every situation.
Because you've existed in both of those spheres and like went from one to the other. So it's like, I'm sure you have more insight on that than I have as a person who's like observing from the outside for like one of those things.
I mean, I just like, but it is good for everybody to know. And that kind of was, so like the last wrap up question I had here, which again is just moving us further and further away from being a comedy podcast, which I think is probably good at this point, given what the world is less funny than I would like it to be. Yep. But I was in a conversation with some straights recently, and they, we're talking about the election and like, how are we gonna live every day? Like, how do you even get up in the morning, and how do you feel? How do you go forward? Which I think is a question that comes from a point of, you haven't been feeling that the whole time. It's a thing that some people feel all the time. But my response to that was having a plan on how you're going to make change, or knowing how you're going to help, and knowing that you've created because you can't do everything, right? Like literally nobody can do everything, and nobody can solve climate change by themselves and genocide by themselves and save all trans people and, dismantle systemic racism and ableism and everything. But I think if you can, at least for me, on the selfish level, the only way I can live with myself is by knowing, okay, I know what my talents and gifts are, and I know that I have a plan to use them, and then I'm going to spend a certain amount of time using those gifts and a certain amount of time recharging myself so that I can do that. And that was my answer to that. The other straight person with me was like, yeah, you just got to rest and take care of yourself. It's like, no, stop it. How do you live with yourself when all you're doing? How do you live with yourself? You've been in the sand. That's fine. Yeah. You've been spending this year doing a lot of like activism on Palestine and all of that. Like what do you think? Do you think that in a way helps you get through the fact that the world is on fire, or not helps, it doesn't make things better, but like, what is your response to this question, I guess, of how do we deal with the future? How do we stay alive?
Like, I was talking with a friend about how I feel like white guilt is pointless. And like after a certain point, and that point being realizing that there's a problem that you've benefited from. Yeah. It just becomes making it about you and self-flagellating and putting a spotlight on yourself and taking space, and which is also part of the problem. So like, it's like once you realize that there's a problem, look to the people who have been dealing with this for centuries, and like especially Black women who have like, it's like, how do you even get up? And it's like, there's no other option. Yeah. Like, and I'm not meaning that, and I know that can be like, oh, just do it, pull yourself. That's not what I'm saying. Like, especially if you got medical stuff or that kind of thing, there's days that like, due to physical or psychological pain, that are going to feel like you can't do anything, and that is valid. But I'm saying for the people who are like, who have closer proximity to privilege, who have closer proximity to being more capable of doing something, that aren't having as many hurdles as far as disability, financial, racial, gender, that kind of thing. Figuring out what your role is, figuring out what you can do. Like in 2020, I was doing safety team for protest because I realized that cops and or antagonistic like dude bros would see me and get happy because they associate people with dwarfism with like a joke or like something that produces joy. And so I would act as a sort of visual de-escalatory thing. And it's like, I'm not going to be like physically bodying anyone. I mean, maybe no one knows, but like, you know, like I could, I guess, but like,
yeah. I'm just like, I mean, you could definitely take a lot of people I know, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. But like, yeah, like, well, yeah, that's also the thing of like how I feel like men overestimate how useful they are in a physical scenario a lot. And like the 1 out of 8
And a
men who
sexual
think they could,
scenario.
like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you're saying like you finding the things that you personally like specifically can do.
And it's like less for a like, yeah, like I don't think I'd have trouble looking at like being able to exist with myself if I wasn't doing what I was doing, but it's not out of a optics thing or a thing of like, oh, you know, I am doing this to run from my demons or whatever. And like in a weird way, it's just like I remember going to a community meeting in Maryland when I was like a kid, and they were talking about how they were gonna build something or like it wasn't a pipeline, but it was some pollution regulation thing, and everyone there voiced their dissent against it, and the council voted to approve it. And I remember just feeling like this isn't right. Like they're ignoring the will of everyone here. Like you're literally polluting like things, and you're just okay with that. And you're saying, oh, well, business. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about business. Like you're poisoning people. And like, it just feels like it's an inherently like, this is what we are being called to do. We are being called to resist. We are being, and like figuring out how to do that and like disentangling yourself from the individualism that we are brought up in, the nuclear family ideology of once I have my white picket fence and don't have any community other than my family, I've made it. And it's like, that's not how any of us were actually even designed. Even if you like, you just look at purely evolutionarily, we're designed to like exist in community with each other. We're designed to like have different roles in society. Like there's a theory that that's why some people are more nocturnal than others is because we slept in shifts back when we were like cavemen and stuff. And like people would have to take night shifts and that kind of thing. And that's why some people are more productive at night or that kind of thing. And like, there's just like figuring out what your niche is. And it's really hard. It's really hard when we're overworked and underpaid and we don't have energy or time. And like for people that are realizing that like, oh, we crossed the 5 degree or something degree threshold that they were saying is not great for climate stuff, or, you know, the genocide or the massive clusterfuck that Trump is bringing with his new administration. Like there's, like we can't bury our heads in the sand and be like, oh, well, we need to disengage and like prioritize our own health. And it's like, yeah, if you are having literal anxiety attacks, if you are unable to function because the news is too much for you to psychologically handle, yes, do your healing, do your thing, because we need, and like even from like, yes, it's self-preservation standpoint, but also we need you. Like we need everyone. Like we can't.
Absolutely. And I do think like, I absolutely agree. And I think for me, the thing that helps me from breaking down with an anxiety attack is knowing that I'm doing something, not again, like not because I feel guilty or because I want people to see me doing something, but just like I'm doing all I can, and thus my anxiety is not productive.
Like, and that's the thing. It's like, like I'm doing what I can, like I could be doing more, I could be doing less, but like I'm doing what I can in the moment. And also feeling like, if I just rage post every day saying like, that's not going to do anything. So I try to be like crossing that balance between like avoiding burnout, trying to have what I do be intentional and impactful rather than just like quality over quantity. And I mean, if you're posting every day and like you're like, rage against the machine, do what you want to do. It's just, for me, I don't think it's something that feels aligned with what I feel like my strengths are, which is like, I mean, part of the reason that I want to do this podcast is like, I think that I have a perspective and I have a worldview and like ability to form thoughts that people kind of need to hear. Like,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
That's the most patting of myself on the back I'm going to do on this podcast.
I agree. Well, I have to end our podcast now, this episode, because I have to go to a musical improv practice, Colin. I'm so sorry.
Nice. Yeah.
But I want to thank everybody for listening to episode 5 of Not Real Men. We have credits now because we've actually started releasing it. So I've got to tell everybody this podcast is hosted by Laser Weber and Colin Buckingham. It's edited by Tracy Barnett with help by Aubrey Turner. Our theme song is by TJ Norton, and our social producer is Morgan Peters, who has made us actually release this, which is so helpful. You can submit questions to us at the link in the description of this podcast video. What am I saying? We'd love to hear your questions, and we'll keep bringing on guests and talking about masculinity and stuff. So suggest a guest, suggest a topic, take care of yourself, and, man up.
Man up, bro.
Man up, bro. You got to do it. Oh, God. Okay, I hated that.
Bye.